I'm Sarah Gardner, and you thought sugar just came from sugar cane. Well, find out how they're turning sugar beets into the sweet stuff.
I'm Jason Schultz. It's harvest time in the Red River Valley, and there's no slowing down when you've got to get the sugar beets out of the ground.
And a pride in the brand, in America's heartland, living close to the land.
There are no city streetlights to guide Neil Rockstad's pickup truck at this hour. It's just him, his dog, and the eerie quiet of rural Minnesota at 1 a.m. With his wife and family soundly sleeping, Neil is getting ready for another long day. There's oil to be checked in the engine and air pressure to check in the tires. It's sugar beet harvest season in an area called the Red River Valley. And that means very little rest for farmers and the drivers who haul tons of beets. The Red River Valley is one of a handful of sugar beet growing areas in the U.S. It's a large swath of land that runs from western Minnesota to eastern North Dakota. In the field and at sugar processing factories across the area, it means moving non-stop until the beets are out of the ground and being turned into sweet sugar.
You might not think of sugar coming from these oversized white beets, but that's exactly what happens once they get to the factory. It's a chemical process that is actually similar to getting sugar from sugarcane. Hundreds of workers will be required to help truck and pile the beets and turn them into sugar. And more are needed to make sure things run as smoothly as possible. If it all doesn't work out as planned, instead of sugar on the shelves, these farmers could lose millions of dollars. It all requires the perfect storm of weather, work, and willpower.
And it all begins in the field with farmers like Neil Rockstad. Outside of the lights of your rig here, it's just pitch black. There's just nothing out there.
Pitch black except for the stars, and if the moon should happen to come up, although I think the moon is coming up after the sun today.
How do you stay awake out here at this hour?
Drink lots of coffee, listen to the radio, and take a few naps when nobody's looking.
Neil carefully follows the rows of sugar beets while driving his tractor. The leafy tops of the sugar beet plants are mowed off before Neil comes along with his digger. The top of the beet is sliced off so it's ready to be easily popped out of the ground. The digger that he's pulling must be lined up just right to pull the beets out of the ground.
And you could say plucking the beets out of the ground. They lift them onto the grab rolls. The purpose of the grab rolls is to clean the mud, separate the mud from the beets, or the dirt from the beets, and then to convey the beets to the back of the harvester. From there, they They fall into the Ferris wheel, and they make a big trip up to the top of the Ferris wheel, get dropped onto an elevator chain and conveyed out to the truck.
Neil is a third-generation sugar beet farmer, following in the steps of his grandfather and uncle. He grows beets for American Crystal Sugar. The company is actually a cooperative of 2,800 growers who raise more than 400,000 acres of sugar beets. That's more than 10 million tons. So the sun's not even going to be up for a few hours, and yet you've been out here already pulling these things out of the ground.
Right. We harvest sugar beets 24 hours a day.
And you got to get them out of the ground, right? That's the deal.
Yep, night or day, we keep rolling as long as the weather cooperates with us, lets us do it.
And this is a beet.
Yep,
this is a sugar beet.
This is a sugar beet, an average size sugar beet that you'd find in any grower's field at harvest time. Some are quite a bit larger, some are smaller, but.
And it's pretty heavy. I mean, there's a lot of mass to this
sure
thing.
there is, yep.
And it's loaded with sugar, essentially. You get the sugar out of this thing in the chemical process.
Yep, once it goes into the factory, it goes in like this and comes out the other end as pure granulated sugar, just like you have on your kitchen table. Fortunately, we've had a few days of drier weather, and the field conditions are pretty nice right where I'm at. Some people aren't so fortunate right now. But when it's muddy, our harvester is in the dirt. It's a root crop, and it's really a pain to harvest the beets. We get it done, but it's a nuisance and it's kind of a mess.
And while nice warm weather would seem ideal for any harvest, for sugar beets it actually can create problems. While it's cool in these overnight hours, a string of warm sunny days has actually warmed up the internal temperature of the beets. We'll explain why that's a problem in a minute, but for farmers like Neil it means stopping down the harvest. Because there are hundreds of thousands of beets being harvested in a small time to have an orderly process, farmers like Neil are assigned harvesting shifts. Neil started at 2 a.m. and will continue until 2 p.m. unless he gets a weather shutdown order from the sugar cooperative.
If they're going to shut down at a certain hour, we all get a text message on our telephone. We all know at exactly the same time.
And for the past few days, Neil and the other farmers have been stopping down at noon, not starting up until it cools off at midnight.
It can be frustrating. Here you might have a beautiful day, the sun is shining, and maybe there's rain in the forecast 2 days from now, but you have to shut down because the beet temperature is too warm.
It's not just farmers burning the midnight oil. I visited the American Crystal Sugar Factory in Hillsboro, North Dakota, where the beets are coming in by the truckload. And the bags of sugar are coming out. Randy Axman is the plant manager. This facility is one of 6 American Crystal Sugar factories. Farmers either bring their beets to piling sites around the area or the closest factory. You have likely heard of sugar from sugar cane, and the process to make sugar from beets isn't much different than making it from cane.
The first step in the processing facility is washing of the beets.
The beets are sliced into French fry-sized pieces, and then they get soaked in hot water to get the sugar inside. That sugar, or sucrose, gets purified, evaporated, filtered, and then spun around in a centrifuge. And finally, you've got sugar.
There is an average time from when the beets enter the entry point in the process. It's approximately 16 to 20 hours before you see crystallized sugar product.
Chemically, there is very little difference between cane and beet sugar, although some bakers do prefer the cane variety.
Back on the farm, they've been at it for several hours, and the sun still hasn't come up. By now, his coffee is as cold as the air outside, but Adam Mund has to stay sharp. He's got to keep his open box truck lined up just right so the waterfall of thousands of beets coming off the conveyor lands in the truck, not on the ground. You can't stray too far from this tractor, can you?
No, I end up getting too far away, we're gonna end up having beets all over the field, and we don't really want that. And kind of valuable.
Neil won't like that one bit.
No. Pretty amazing. I mean, all the equipment it takes and the sheer number of people that American Crystal alone employs is pretty staggering. Like we were talking about yesterday, how with all the temporary work, people literally schedule their vacations around beet harvest so they can come and drive or work the piler or work the roto beater, whatever they got to do. So, but I definitely enjoy it. The shift's kind of rough, 2 a.m. to 2 p.m.
That is not a good shift.
No, but one of my coworkers kind of made a good point on the first day that by the time you're starting to get pretty run down and tired, the sun is coming up. So you're looking forward to that sun coming up to keep you awake, and then from there on out, it's smooth sailing.
Is this your tired time right now?
Yeah, kind of in the gap between when I run out of coffee and between when the sun comes up. Right now we're headed to the beet piler, which is maybe 3 or 4 miles away.
How many trips a day will you make there to the beet pile?
It usually averages out to be about 1 an hour. On a good day, one of the first days we started, all the fields were good, the piler wasn't backed up. Actually got 18 loads in a 12-hour shift, but that's fairly rare. So,
That's a lot of trips back and forth.
Yeah. Got laid off this summer doing concrete, and the economy kind of got my boss and got laid off and was looking for work come fall. And they actually put up a note in the hardware store, and Neil saw it and gave me a call and was willing to work with me even though I didn't have any experience, and kind of showed me the ropes, and here I am.
That turned out to be pretty good. Pretty good deal that he had some faith in you, I guess.
Yeah, it worked out really well. It was a pretty good guy willing to teach you, and if you've got a question, he'll answer it for you, so that's always nice.
So like a lot of people, when the economy went south, you find yourself out of work, essentially.
Yeah, pretty much, especially with, construction. The Fargo-Moorhead metro area, they say hasn't been, hit by the economy as bad as some areas of the nation, but, construction still slows down, and that hurts a lot of guys, especially the smaller guys. So, but good thing, like I was saying before, the beet harvest employs so many people that it doesn't matter what the economy's doing, the crops got to come in.
As the sun rises, the rest of the folks here start showing signs of life. Neil Rockstad's wife, Elizabeth, is on her way to her job teaching at the local high school. And if any of those sugar beet truck drivers want another quick cup of coffee, well, Roberta Heddervig's Hallstad Cafe is open for business.
This is the West Ada piling station where farmers are bringing in their sugar beets round the clock right now. In fact,
Hey, Sarah, what's going on?
Hey, Jason, how are you?
Good.
You've been on the farm.
I got about 15 tons of beets ready to dump on this pile. It's just a small dent.
Oh, yeah, just a very small dent, in
You've been
fact.
busy.
Yeah, we were at the processing plant, and it occurred to me while we were there watching the trucks and the big equipment and the people go every which way, that this is really a well-orchestrated dance, getting the crops from the field to the piling site and then onto the processing plant.
And I'm amazed at how much weather plays a critical factor. I mean, they got to get these beets on this pile before Mother Nature says, shut it down.
Speaking of which,
Oh, yeah, I
you better
get back
going.
to the truck. All right.
You're
well,
holding up the process.
Yeah, I can't do that anymore. I'll check in with you later.
Sounds good.
All right, let's get these on the pile. You ready to go? Let's go. See you, Sarah.
There are millions of beets stacked 4 stories high. It's truly a mountain of beets.
These are massive piles of beets. How many tons of beets are in these piles?
In this pile here, we probably have 70,000 ton approximately. For the total site that we're at today, 140,000 ton. It's not one of our largest stations, but a good chunk of beets.
This site can handle about 40 trucks an hour at all hours.
Our goal, though, is to turn these guys around in 15 minutes. So they weigh in and weigh out, dump their load and weigh out in about 15 minutes.
The beets will be piled at sites like this across the area through the upcoming winter months. The cool temperatures keep the beets from rotting. But if the beets go into the pile too warm or too cold, it could slowly cause them to decay. And with the beet piles here worth about $10 million each, that's not something anybody wants. It could mean a giant section of the beets is unusable for sugar. So checking the beet temperature is critical.
So we have a window basically of about 28 degrees where the roots will start to freeze, up to about 65 degrees. We have to operate within that window. Anything outside that window, we'll have to shut down.
And today, the temperature is getting too close to that 65-degree danger zone. So another heat shutdown could be in the works. And with warm weather in the forecast for the next few days, it could be extended. That wouldn't be good news for farmers itching to get their crop out of the ground. The longer they wait, the more chance that rain, cold, or even snow could cause problems.
Now during the day, it's supposed to be warm today. We'll actually probe the beets with the thermometer and watch the temps as they come in. When we see them start to climb, we can shut down harvest then.
The shutdown information is so important that the local radio station has a daily sugar beet report. And today, the call has to be made.
We have the latest from American Crystal Sugar Company of Hillsboro. Industry-wide, the shutdown will be at noon today because of heat.
And shutting down the pile again isn't just bad news for farmers. About 13,000 people are needed to help bring in the harvest. Drivers and workers at the piling sites all feel the impact. Workers like Gerald Maxwell. He and his brother are retired, but drive up from Florida in their RVs each year to help out with the beet harvest.
They got a campgrounds over here in Hillsboro, very nice, full hookups. They pay the campground for us, so we don't have to be responsible for that. And we got my brother here and a couple other friends in camper clubs that are together, so we kind of, if we're not working, we're kind of enjoying each other, going out to supper and having a barbecue and whatever, you know. When we're not working, like today, we get off early today, so we'll probably have a steak fry when we get home tonight.
Am I invited?
Yeah, come.
I want to come for dinner.
Okay.
And Gerald isn't the only one on a working vacation. The harvest requires such a large workforce that hundreds of temporary workers will come from across the country to help out.
Okay, so are you going to come back for more next year?
Oh, I'm sure we will. My brother Will and I will come back, yeah. And the other families that are up here with us will come back. They all seem to, they kind of say sometimes, oh, we're not going to do that again. Next fall, we're up here.
Do your family members try to tell you, hey, look, you're supposed to be taking it easy. Why are you working?
My sons and my daughter are wondering what I'm doing up here, exactly. But it's something, it breaks up our year, you know, and it's good for us to do something. We don't want to be sitting around all the time.
Back at the Halstead Cafe, the lunch rush is on, such as it is in this town of just over 500. It's hard for Roberta Hedervig to predict just how many customers she'll get during sugar beet season. If the crews are going strong in the fields, well, they're not stopping for a home-cooked lunch. But if the weather has put a stop to harvesting, well, she'll expect a crowd.
There's a lot more orders where people have a group of workers to feed out in the field.
Roberta's connection to sugar beet farmers is more than just serving up their daily special. She grew up cooking for the workers on her family's sugar beet farm.
I was mom's helper, so I was in the house, and if there was 8 people or 20 people to feed, we fed them. So, and sometimes it was 3 meals a day. It's a higher energy level. Everybody's kind of geared up, and you hope everything goes safely and that we can get the crop off without there being any major glitches.
Now Roberta's mom helps her in the kitchen at the restaurant.
Back in Ada, Roberta's husband Bob is hard at work at the local co-op. There are tires to change, and this time of year, he's on call 24 hours a day.
A lot of times it's real busy, sometimes it's fairly quiet. When it's been nice now, the guys are shut down with the harvest during the day and they got time to look at stuff and check it, get it in a little better shape.
Changing a tire may not seem like a big deal by itself, but across this region, the economic impact of this harvest adds up quickly. We're talking upwards of $3 billion.
You're a busy guy this time of year.
Yeah, I am. I'm on call 24/7.
Local farm equipment dealer Roger Hansen will be working on harvesting equipment day and night over the next 4 weeks. Last year, Roger put 9,000 miles on his truck driving to farm fields for repairs. That kind of support is critical for farmers like David Aarons. He's getting his harvester repaired today.
And how important is it for you to have everything running, tip-top this time of year during the sugar beet harvest?
Very important.
Because if you lose a piece of equipment, what would it do to you?
Well, this thing, without this, I don't do anything.
Or D, a color made by mixing 3 colors.
The afternoon bell is about to ring at the high school in the nearby town of Ulen. And Elizabeth Rockstad, known as Mrs. Rockstad around here, is winding down her day.
Okay, that's it. You guys can head out.
It's the end of the day, long day in the classroom, right?
Yep.
In the meantime, your husband's been at it all day out in the sugar beet field. You guys are busy.
Yeah, well, that's part of the farming life, I guess, is it's go, go, go all the time. But certain times of the year, busier than the others.
And this is the busy time.
This is as busy as it gets usually.
I imagine a lot of the kids in your class, same thing, right? Their parents are probably doing the same thing.
Yeah, this whole area is big sugar area, big agriculture area. And so yeah, they're either combining soybeans right now or lifting beets, and some are doing both,
Back on the Rockstad's farm in Ada, Neil's father is almost finished harvesting a swath of soybeans. That heat shutdown gives Neil an opportunity to check in on other farm business.
No.
From the small towns to the rural countryside, October is sugar beet season in the Red River Valley.
And this year, families like the Rockstads look forward to a record harvest. Neil knows that he doesn't have long to linger over lemonade on this warm afternoon. In less than 12 hours, he'll be back at it on the tractor, guided by the moonlight, harvesting sweet beets.
Sugar beets are the first crop planted in the spring and flourish in the rich soils found near river and lake beds in the temperate climate across northern tier states. Small pelleted seeds are planted about 4 inches apart, 20 to 60 rows at a time, with nearly 60,000 seeds sowed per acre. As beets grow during the summer, growers manage the crop to eliminate weeds and minimize disease. In the fall, once each beet has reached about 3 to 5 pounds, the harvest begins. The lush green leaves are removed from the plant and the large white roots are lifted from the soil. Loose soil is removed from the beets and the roots are loaded into trucks for delivery to receiving stations. Beets are placed into 18 to 25 foot high piles, which can be up to 300 feet wide and up to a quarter mile long. These sugar beets can be stored for up to 6 months before being processed at a nearby factory. During the storage process, ventilation tubes are placed under some piles in order to cool or freeze the beets to ensure they do not spoil while they are waiting to be processed. beets are removed from the storage piles with large front-end loaders and introduced into the factory process. Sucrose is naturally abundant in the beet, with up to 20% of the root being sugar. Through a series of separation steps, the sugar is extracted from the root. As the sugar beets are floated into the factories by way of a fluming system, rocks and additional topsoil are removed. Next, these beets are washed prior to being sliced into long shoestring potato-like pieces called cassettes that expose the cell structure, allowing the sucrose to be diffused out of the fiber, creating raw juice. The diffusion process occurs in a 100-foot tower where hot water passes over the cassettes to remove the sugar. Once the sugar or sucrose is removed, the remaining fiber is pressed, dried, and pelletized so it can be sold as a high-value animal feed. This raw juice has impurities that will be removed through carbonation and filtration. Limestone is mixed with foundry-type coke and then superheated in a kiln to create milk of lime and carbon dioxide. This is then mixed with the raw juice to react and precipitate impurities. After the initial purification, the juice continues through filters and into a series of evaporators for concentration. Inside vacuum pans, during the next step, the liquid boils and gets thicker, much like maple syrup. Once the mixture reaches the proper saturation, it is seeded with microscopic sugar crystals, which are boiled until they reach the right size. Then they're ready to be spun out in high-speed centrifugals. The thick crystal and syrup mixture is added to centrifugals which spin at 1200 revolutions per minute, which quickly separates the pure white sugar crystals from the molasses. Damp sugar crystals are then moved to the dryer where filtered warm air dries the sugar. Then the sugar is cooled and conditioned before being stored in the silos prior to shipment to customers. Sugar is sent in bulk to food manufacturing customers in rail cars or trucks. It is also packaged in 50 and 100-pound bags, as well as 1-ton super sacks for certain customers. Bags of 2, 4, 5, and 10 pounds are packaged for grocery stores. Over 50% of all domestic sugar in the United States comes from sugar beets. Beet sugar facilities run around the clock 7 days a week during the processing season. Once a sugar beet enters the factory, it takes approximately 12 hours before the sugar is extracted. No bleaching or chemical whitening is used during the process. Pure and natural white sugar is an essential ingredient to many of the foods consumed daily throughout the United States.
Welcome to Amalgamated Sugar's Minnecaja factory, one of the largest sugar beet processing facilities in the world. Originally constructed in 1917, the Minnecaja factory has evolved as new technology has been developed and capacity has increased. Today, the factory is capable of processing 21,550 tons of sugar beets a day, for a total of 3.85 million tons during a campaign. This is equivalent to processing approximately 20 acres of sugar beets every hour for 200 days. The Minnecaja factory will produce approximately 3 million pounds of sugar a day, year-round, using the sugar extracted from the sugar beets during campaign. Sugar beets enter the factory through a flume, which washes the beets, removing dirt and debris before they're sliced. A rotary rock catcher removes heavy materials from the water and sugar beets. After being washed, the sugar beets make their way to the hopper, where they wait to be cut into French fry-looking strips called cassettes. The cassettes are placed in a diffuser, which uses hot water to soak the sugar out of the sugar beet, using diffusion. The cassettes remain in the diffuser for roughly an hour. The liquid that remains after soaking the sugar beet cassettes in hot water is called raw juice. After most of the sugar has been diffused, the sugar beet still has a purpose. Now called wet pulp, the cassettes are pressed, dried, and sold as cattle feed. The raw juice, which contains the sugar, is sent to carbonation, where milk of lime and carbon dioxide are used to purify the juice. Impurities in the raw juice are removed using clarifiers and filters. The juice is now called thin juice and looks like tea. We will also soften the thin juice using equipment similar to a home water softener. Softening the thin juice prevents the buildup of hard water scale in the evaporators and other heating equipment. The system used to soften the thin juice was developed by our subsidiary company, Amalgamated Research LLC. The thin juice is concentrated using multiple effect evaporators and is now called thick juice, which looks like maple syrup. Thin juice is approximately 80% water, while thick juice is about 30% water. The Parker-CSI factory produces approximately 2,500 gallons of distilled water per minute from the evaporators. This water is called condensate. Thick juice goes one of two places, either to the sugar end of the factory to be crystallized into sugar, or into large storage tanks to be crystallized later during the juice campaign. On the pan floor of the factory, thick juice is enriched with raw sugars in the high melter and filtered. The liquid is now called standard liquor. The standard liquor is further concentrated in large vacuum pans until there is not enough water to keep the sugar dissolved. At this point, a small amount of ground sugar crystals called fondant is injected into the vacuum pan as seed, so the sugar crystals start to grow the appropriate size. After the sugar crystals reach the correct size, a centrifugal machine is used to separate the remaining liquid from the sugar crystals. From this point, the sugar is dried, cooled, weighed, and sent to storage. Sugar is moved to large storage silos where it awaits shipment. This particular silo is 116 feet in diameter and 90 feet high. That is as tall as a 7-story building. There are 3 silos of this size at the Parker-CSI factory, and each can hold 40 million pounds of sugar. The remaining syrup is crystallized 2 more times, producing raw sugars that are used to enrich thick juice into standard liquor. The final syrup is called molasses. At our Twin Falls and Nampa factories, molasses is processed through large chromatography columns called separators to capture any remaining sugar and another sugar beet byproduct called betaine. This recovery process was also developed by Amalgamated Research LLC. From storage, the sugar is classified into various granulation sizes by passing through a series of screens and then packaged. While the Parker-CSI factory produces some sugar that is packaged for retail, most of the sugar made in this factory is shipped in bulk for commercial use. This sugar leaves the factory in trucks and rail cars and is used as an ingredient in candy, baked goods, beverages, and other products. The majority of Amalgamated Sugar's retail packaging happens at our Nampa factory. Amalgamated Sugar is a leader in sustainable food production. We release 49% less greenhouse gases and use 29% less fossil fuel energy per bag of sugar than we did 20 years ago. We are committed to operating with the environment, community, and our employees in mind. We hope you've enjoyed learning more about how sugar is produced at Amalgamated Sugar. If you would like to learn more about our company, please visit amalgamatedsugar.com. Pure, sweet, grower-owned. The Amalgamated Sugar Company.
These machines harvest the cane by cutting it at the base. The heavier lengths of cane drop into the base of a conveyor, which feeds them into the transport bin that follows alongside. At the mill, trucks empty their load onto a receiving table. It feeds a belt conveyor that takes the cane through 2 separate washes. The cane must be as clean as possible for extracting the juice. But first, the cane's hard structure is broken down inside this crusher, where rotating hammers break the cane into small pieces. A conveyor loads it into a milling tandem designed to extract the sweet juice from the crushed cane. In this milling tandem, the cane passes through a series of 5 or more consecutive mills. Large cylinders compress the cane fibre. The juice pours out of the milling tandem and diverts into a channel away from the bagasse, the dry pulp that remains after extracting the juice. A worker supervises the operation at each of the mills. A vat collects the juice that flows from the top and bottom of the mills. Now that the juice is extracted from the sugar cane, it's time to process it. However, before it's turned into sugar crystals, a sample goes through a series of tests at the sugar mill's laboratory. They add a thickener that binds to impurities in the juice, and then filter it to make it clear and clean. Then it's poured into a polarimeter, a machine that measures the concentration of sugar. The juice from the mills now falls through this 10-meter-high tower as sulfur dioxide vapors rise through it. This process, known as sulfitation, bleaches the juice. Then it flows through a device that measures its pH level. While at a separate vat, workers add powdered lime to water, preparing a solution to which they will then add the juice. An agitator mixes the cane juice and lime solution for about 6 hours to complete a process called alkalization. It regulates the juice's pH level and helps clarify it. In reaction to the lime, the juice's color changes from brown to yellow. Next, the juice goes into these clarifier tanks. It takes over 2 hours for the juice to settle and for the impurities to fall to the bottom of the tank. A sample taken from the tank shows how the sludge collects at the bottom, while the clarified juice collects at the top. There's still quite a way to go before it's transformed into the stuff that goes into your tea. Workers filter the residue, known as mud, from the clarifier tanks to extract any remaining sugar. There's no waste here. The mud will fertilize the cane fields, and the bagasse left over will be burned as fuel. The clarified juice collected from the clarifier tanks now boils in a series of evaporators. This brings the concentration of the sugar in the juice up from 15% to 60%. Then the juice collects in 15-ton tanks to clarify even more. Any sediment left in the juice floats to the top. A rotating paddle skims this residue off to the sides of the tank. These tanks produce a type of syrup that goes on for still more processing. Workers now pour sucrose crystals suspended in alcohol into the syrup. This milky solution binds to the sugar present in the syrup and helps draw it out. Next, it all boils in large vacuum pans, forming sugar crystals. As the water in the syrup boils away, workers regularly check to see how the sugar is crystallizing. The goal? To produce a thick crystallized paste known as masquite. It then goes into a high-speed centrifugal machine to remove the sugar crystals from the uncrystallized syrup. Inside, the sugar spins at 1,200 revolutions per minute. This action draws the molasses to the outer shell of the machine, while the crystals remain in the inner basket. Sprays of water wash the crystals, then the water is drawn out so only the crystals remain. This centrifuge draws out moisture from the sugar just like a washing machine on spin cycle dries your clothes. Next, a conveyor belt carries the sugar crystals out of the centrifuge. This mill produces raw sugar, which has more molasses and is unbleached, and plantation white sugar, which has less molasses and is bleached a brilliant white. The sugar on the conveyor now goes into a large dryer. Hot air blows into this dryer to bring the sugar's humidity level down to 0.02%. That's standard for table sugar. The dried sugar pours out from the dryer into a bag on a scale. It's full when it weighs in at 1,000 kilos. A hoist then carries the bags to a platform at the far end of the packing facility. At 3,000 kilos, that is a heavy load. It lowers each bag over a chute that leads to the factory's main floor. Workers carefully open each bag in turn and pour out the sugar directly into the chute. It feeds an automated packaging machine which fills a series of 2-kilo plastic bags, seals them and separates them. This packing facility produces 200,000 bags every day. That means processing 400 tons of white sugar daily.